Hello and welcome to the Leading with Lean podcast. My name's Philip Holt, author of Leading with Lean, The Simplicity of Lean, and Leading Lean by Living Lean. And in this podcast, I narrate all three of my books, chapter by chapter, in which I share with you my over 30 years of experience as a lean leader across many companies globally. The Simplicity of Lean, Chapter 8, Standardised Work. Why do you need standardised work? Standardised work is one of the cornerstones of a lean thinking organisation. It minimises waste by defining repeatable work sequences, paced to customer demand, flowing continuously using a pull system. It creates stability in the production system by defining the most effective method of doing the work, ensuring the harmony of people, processes, and technology. Standardised work is the basis for Kaizen, as it defines the baseline performance that problem solving and hence Kaizen can be based upon. Chapter 11 will cover that in more detail. Unfortunately, it's not that common in most organisations, although many companies I have visited believe that they have it in place, as they have documented SOPs, standard operating procedures, or work instructions linked to their quality system. However, these usually turn out to be work standards, documentation created by manufacturing or quality engineers, or perhaps process owners that are kept in a file and dusted off whenever an audit of some type occurs. Standardised work is different, as it is created by the people who do the work, in collaboration with their group leaders, process owners and engineers, with the intention of capturing the best current way of doing the work and setting the baseline for further improvement. The thinking behind work standards tends to accept that the method that is observed, timed and documented is the best method or standard. It may not be the best method at all, merely a measurement of one person's performance of a process at that time. On the other hand, standardised work uses takt time, which we'll explain more further on in the chapter, work sequencing, and standardised work in process, WIP, to determine the best combination of manual and machine work. As standardised work is designed around takt time, it ensures that the overall flow is optimised and individual processes are not sub-optimised. Standardised work also makes waste and abnormality visible. The goal is not to reduce unit cost by increasing so-called efficiency against a work standard, but rather to find quicker, safer, and easier ways to do the work based upon the feedback from the people doing the work and the problems that they encounter every single day. To summarise the differences, in the book I've set out a table which shows on the left-hand side standardised work, on the right-hand side work standards, and there's a list of the differences, of which I'll now cover a few. Standardised work, we have to make improvements. Work standards, we have to make the numbers. Standardised work, minimise overall cost. Work standards, minimise unit cost. Standardised work, human-centred. Work standards, asset-centred. And in the book, there's a number of these. If I was to summarise the key reasons why we need to utilise standardised work in an organisation, it is because it sets a baseline, identifies and eliminates process variability, provides structure for cross-training, enables visual management of abnormalities, sustains the gains from previous Kaizen and presents an opportunity for further Kaizen, supports all lean tools, systems and philosophies. If we know how to do something well, we should ensure that everyone does it the same way and then use that as the basis for Kaizen. It sounds logical, but in most organisations, team members do it their way, which makes it very difficult to gain consistency of output, understand the reasons for variation, or to improve the process. Keeping it visual. Thinking back to Chapter 5, a key element of lean is visual management, and standardised work is no exception. This means that anyone should be able to understand at a glance how the process works, and training of team members ought to be straightforward. When standards are not visible, mistakes can happen. When they are visible, mistakes are less likely. This means that we ought to think about how we document our standardised work, making it as easy as possible to follow in a visual sense. This also applies to having a standardised format for the documentation, so that our team members don't need to interpret the document, only the content. As discussed in Chapter 5, people retain much more information from visual materials and respond more quicker to visual prompts. It's therefore extremely important to ensure that, where possible, visuals are used, whether that be a photo or a screenshot. Implementing standardised work. When implementing standardised work, one of the biggest challenges will be the change management aspect, with resistance often coming from the team members who might view this as an imposition. This is usually less of a concern in the manufacturing environment, where the use of some form of standard is commonplace, and the opportunity to own and improve them might be a positive thing. However, in the office environment, this is usually quite a novel concept, especially for the higher educated team members, and therefore there will often be resistance, with statements such as, "We're not robots," or "This takes away my creativity." The best way to deal with this is to explain that standardised work establishes a baseline for continuous improvement, creatively finding solutions to problems that prevent us from following a standard. Much of what people experience as creativity is creatively getting around problems on a one-time basis, or firefighting, both of which are less effective than continuous improvement based upon standardised work. In fact, if you take the time to understand what the team members do daily, it will usually become clear that they spend a lot of time solving, temporarily, the same problems on a regular basis. As I've described for most of the implementation aspects of lean thinking, the most effective way to win over the team members is to find some volunteers, perhaps a team who have a lot of performance challenges, and work with them to establish a model area that can act as a role model for the rest of the organisation. It can be quite a surprise for most teams just how much of a performance improvement and reduction in effort can be achieved through the standardisation of the processes, activities and tasks. Often you will begin with discussions about the external to the team improvements that are required, or the technology or system fixes or upgrades that are required to be made. But as soon as you are able to show the benefits of standardised work, the team members will slowly realise that they can be masters of their own performance improvement, not victims of circumstance. There are 7 steps of standardised work creation. I'll list them now. Number 1, process. Number 2, tact time. Number 3, balance. Number 4, sequence and layout. 5, SOP. 6, sustain. 7, Kaizen. Number 5, SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. And what you'll see in the book is the 7 steps of standardised work visualised, where it shows the plan, do, checked elements of it, and quite clearly shows that the first 4 elements, the process, tact time, balance, sequence and layout, are part of the plan elements. Then the do is about putting that into the standardised work documentation, the SOP and the job element sheets. The check is around the sustain, and then the act is the Kaizen that we implement. So as with most of the elements of leading with lean and the simplicity of lean, it's really about getting the planning right, and then the do, check and act should follow much more smoothly. Let's run through all 7 one by one. Number 1, process. The first step is where we visualise the process via a value stream or process map. This allows everyone involved to describe, align and understand the way the process works, and to agree upon the best approach. Mapping the process is essential in order to gain familiarity and consensus. Do not assume it's right, go and see. Process trials need to be conducted to observe and time the process, surfacing constraints or other issues. The current cycle time needs to be established, which is the time taken to complete one cycle of work, and the process capacity, what can be achieved in a day or a shift. Number 2, tact time. This is a German word meaning beat, which was adopted in lean terminology, as it is an elegant way of describing the time it takes to deliver one product or service for the total customer demand. Tact time is calculated very simply. Tact time equals the net available time, usually in seconds, per day, divided by the customer demand per day. For example, if a team works between 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m, have a 15-minute break in the morning and afternoon, and a 45-minute lunch, they will have 26,100 seconds of available time. If the customer needs 220 units of product or service per day, then the tact time will be calculated as tact time equals 26,100 seconds divided by 220 units equals 119 seconds. Probably more accurate, 119 seconds per unit. Business is, of course, not consistent over time, and therefore there will be growth, loss of business, cyclical or seasonal elements which we need to take into account. So there will never be a constant tact time. Therefore, a sensible interval of tact time calculation must be determined to ensure that the standardised work can be designed. However, One important element to consider is that it's unlikely that any process will work 100% efficiently, and therefore designing a process to meet takt time precisely is doomed to failure. We therefore must introduce the concept of cycle time, whereby cycle time is the time taken to produce or deliver one product or service unit, and must always be less than takt time if we are to successfully meet demand. It's difficult to apply a one-size-fits-all approach to the cycle time to takt time ratio, but typically it will be 80 to 90%, with the higher figure being more appropriate for highly automated processes and the lower number more fitting to highly manual processes, where human fatigue and variation in training, experience and skill will influence variation. Taking the average, 85%, we will want to achieve a cycle time in this example of around 101 seconds, which is 119 seconds times 0.85. Number 3, balance. Once we understand what our takt and cycle time targets are, we can ensure that we have a balanced process. A great technique for this is in lean terms called yamazumi, which comes from the Japanese words of yama, mountain, and zumi, stack. It is essentially a method for visualizing each of the process steps or activities to ensure that they contain a balanced work content. And in the book, you'll see a visualization of 5 process steps, their actual time, the cycle time target, and the takt time target. And it shows, in this case, an unbalanced process where the first process is actually above the cycle time target, second one is significantly under it, the third one is nearly at it, the fourth one is less than half of the cycle time target, and the fifth one is a nice appropriate level. Essentially, the work content per activity is calculated and mapped in a chart that provides a clear visualization of the time taken per activity and provides the opportunity to balance work across the activities. And in the second visualization in the book, you would see the same chart, but with the first process broken down where we've identified the waste in each of the elements of the overall stack. However, getting to the next level of granularity, whereby the tasks per activity are studied to identify the value added, essential non-value added, and wasteful tasks, provides the true opportunity to remove waste and not only balance the activities, but also reduce the number of people required to complete them. And what it shows in the next visualization in the book is that we've actually moved down to 4 process steps, all meeting cycle time roughly, and showing a really nicely balanced process with the waste reduced. Number 4, work sequence and layout. Work sequencing is where the tasks are analysed to understand the relationships between manual operations, system or machine operations, time spent in transport or motion, and time spent waiting. This might be done in parallel to the balancing step as part of the waste reduction analysis, but should ultimately result in a clear definition of the task taken to deliver the output of the activity. Dependent upon the type of process, a standard work combination sheet is a good way of documenting the tasks and making the activity very clear. And again, in the book, we have another visualization which shows a standard work combination sheet. If you're not familiar with these documents and you're listening to the audiobook, obviously you can't see the visualization. So I would suggest Googling standard work combination sheet, and you should find many examples on the net. Once the sequence is clear, it's essential that we establish the optimal layout to facilitate the effective execution of the process. In a physical environment, the ergonomics are essential, and the reduction of motion and the maximum safety of the team members is of the utmost importance. However, there is no less important to the office environment, whereby we can ensure that working hours are optimised to reduce overtime and improve the life balance of our team members. The main difference in the office environment is for companies with multiple locations, particularly with time zone differences, where the connection of the team members requires an additional level of nuance. This causes problems for many organisations, but the lean thinking answer to this is to utilise what are called workflow cycles to coordinate activity and standardise work to combat the natural human instinct to work with those close and neglect those afar. The effect of this, connecting teams that are geographically and chronologically separated, is to provide an extended team spirit, and we are in it together mindset that's essential for success. Where team members are geographically co-located, traditional lean thinking of layout based upon teams is still very relevant. reduce the number of motions, perform motions simultaneously, shorten motion distance, make motions easier. However, some lateral thinking provides us with a modified approach for those teams that work across geography and/or time. Reduce the waiting time between tasks in different geographies. Utilize workflow cycles to coordinate tasks. Use joint metrics and communication technology to align team objectives. Ensure that standardized work is common across teams and owned by a single process owner. I've mentioned more than once the concept of workflow cycles. They are, in my opinion, the most effective countermeasure to geographical, organisational and chronological separation that we have available in our toolkit. They require discipline and standardisation to work, but are very simple in their concept. Firstly, work that must be done by a team is synchronised to a particular time of the day. Secondly, the duration of the workflow cycle is determined by the tact or capacity of the team. The workflow cycle has standardised work to ensure that all tasks or activities are undertaken in the correct order and in a common manner. Fourthly, the workload is balanced to ensure an efficient process. For example, perhaps an accounts payable team must process invoices daily, and several of them will be put on hold for various reasons. On average, it takes the team around 195 seconds to deal with a held invoice, and around 35 are held per day. However, they often don't resolve them all, and sometimes team members are waiting feedback from other team members they have emailed for input. This means that whilst there are around 6,825 seconds worth of work per day releasing invoices, or 1.9 hours, the team members often take much longer to resolve all of the issues. In the lean thinking approach, the team would plan a 2-hour workflow cycle per day to deal with held invoices, coordinating all the required team members at the same time, ensuring that, on average, 35 invoices could be dealt with. On days where the average time to deal was longer than 195 seconds, or there were more invoices to deal with, the business criticality would determine whether the team extended their workflow cycle or simply allowed the remainder to roll over to the next day. The workflow cycle is quite a change in working for many, but it is a revelation in terms of reducing the lead time of processes and is the same lean thinking that you will find in the concept of agile sprints. Number 5, SOPs. When consensus is reached on both the work sequence and layout, then a standard operating procedure, SOP, can be written and a standard layout document produced. Remember that there is no standard until the process is fully documented, something which is often forgotten, and a lot of hard work lost due to a lack of documentation. The SOP is intended to be a living document and not something that should be hidden in a filing cabinet or a computer's hard drive. It ought to be used every day and be the reference point for training, performance checks, and Kaizen. The SOP's purpose is to confirm the agreed process, identify the main steps and order of the process, show the key points and know-how, provide short, informative text, be as visual as possible. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Number 6, sustain. The sustainment of standardised work is essential to the sustainability of the lean system. In essence, if you can't maintain the standardised work discipline, you will not be able to maintain the lean management system. Standardised work is maintained mainly through 3 of the lean leadership activities. Number 1, leader standard work. Secondly, Kamishibai. And thirdly, daily management. These approaches have been discussed in depth in earlier chapters, and so I won't repeat, but suffice it to say, the discipline and courage necessary to apply rigour to this is a determining factor in the success of your lean transformation. As discussed in Chapter 3, the lean management system relies upon the nexus from the team members through to the senior leadership. Number 7, Kaizen. As I'm writing this book, I feel excited as I get close to Chapter 11 and the topic of Kaizen, as it is an oft misunderstood element of lean thinking. To avoid duplication of Chapter 11, I'll refrain from qualifying that statement and instead focus on the key stages of Kaizen that standardised work enables. Number 1, run to standard and ensure stabilisation. Number 2, identify variability. Number 3, determine the problem statement, variability, consistently below target, or a need to increase the target. Number 4, problem solve, determine the root cause, countermeasures, and implement. Number 5, standardise the improvement, Kaizen. Done well, the rollout of standardised work across your organisation will be, without hyperbole, revolutionary. as performance is standardised and the problems that are solved are kept solved, and brain power may then be used for the new problems. And the final element of the chapter is, where there is no standard, there can be no Kaizen. Taiichi Ono.